Ladies and gentlemen, in our fast-paced, ever-changing world, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Every day we face countless influences, some positive, some negative, that challenge our peace of mind. But what if I told you that there is a way to remain unshaken, no matter what life throws your way? The key lies within us, in understanding how we can stay anchored in the storm of external circumstances. The first step toward achieving this steady state is embracing self-acknowledgement. We must begin by turning inward, taking the time to understand ourselves, our thoughts, desires, and fears. The more deeply we know ourselves, the less we are swayed by the shifting winds of the world outside. When we possess clarity about who we are no longer easily shaken by the judgments or actions of others. Our center becomes unmovable and life's turbulence becomes less daunting. It is in self-awareness that we find the resilience to stand firm. The second step involves emotional integration. Life in all its beauty brings both light and shadow. We experience joy, but we also face pain. We encounter success, but we also suffer loss. Too often we try to push away the darker emotions, to hide them or deny their existence. But these emotions, though difficult, are as much a part of us as the positive ones. True emotional strength comes from accepting all aspects of ourselves, the shadow and the light. By embracing our full range of experiences, we achieve a sense of inner harmony. This integration grants us the stability to weather any storm without losing our sense of self. The third step is to let go of the need for external validation. We live in a world that constantly seeks our attention through the media, through social connections, through the expectations of others. But the moment we tie our self-worth to external sources, we place our happiness and sense of security in the hands of forces beyond our control. To ensure that nothing affects us, we must cultivate a sense of value that comes from within. When our worth is not dependent on external opinions or circumstances, we free ourselves from the sway of others' judgments. We stand as individuals, unshaken, grounded in the knowledge that our true value comes from who we are, not from how we are perceived. So how do we make sure nothing affects us? We do so by knowing ourselves deeply, by integrating the full spectrum of our emotions, and by finding our sense of worth within. When we follow these steps, we become less vulnerable to the chaos around us, more resilient in the face of life's trials. To make sure that nothing affects you, the first key point involves embracing self-acknowledge. Self-awareness is the foundation of mental resilience and emotional stability. In a world where we are constantly bombarded with external influences, be it the opinions of others, societal expectations, or personal challenges, developing a deep understanding of who we are becomes not just a luxury, but a necessity. Self-acknowledge is not something that simply comes with age. It requires intention, introspection, and at times, a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about oneself. When we truly understand our inner landscape, we become less vulnerable to the external forces that might otherwise throw us off balance. At its core, self-acknowledge is about being attuned to our internal world. It means understanding the patterns of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. When we know our own triggers, the motivations that drive us, and the fears that hold us back, we can respond to situations with clarity and purpose, rather than react impulsively. Self-awareness enables us to approach life with mindfulness, ensuring that we are not swayed by momentary emotions or fleeting circumstances. A deep sense of self-awareness requires us to engage in honest introspection. This is not always an easy process. It can be difficult to look inward and confront parts of ourselves that we may have ignored or suppressed. We all have aspects of our psyche that we find uncomfortable, the weaknesses, the insecurities, and the mistakes we've made. It is tempting to shy away from these aspects, but true self-acknowledge requires us to face them directly. By doing so, we remove the power these elements might otherwise have over us. Instead of denying them or letting them control our actions unconsciously, we bring them into the light of awareness and transform them into sources of strength. In addition to acknowledging our weaknesses, self-acknowledge also involves recognizing our strengths, understanding what we excel at, what brings us joy, and what motivates us, allows us to step into our lives with confidence. When we are grounded in our strengths, we become more self-assured, and this self-assurance acts as a protective shield against the negativity and uncertainties of the outside world. If we are aware of what we are capable of, it becomes easier to navigate challenges, because we approach them with a sense of trust in our abilities. Another important aspect of self-knowledge is understanding our values and beliefs. Our values shape our decisions, guide our actions, and influence our perception of the world. If we are unclear about what we stand for or what truly matters to us, we are more susceptible to being influenced by the opinions and pressures of. We become less dependent on external validation because we have a clear sense of what is right for us. This clarity allows us to make decisions that are in alignment with our authentic selves rather than seeking approval from others. Moreover, self-awareness helps us to recognize the patterns in our behavior and thinking. All of us have habits, both good and bad, that influence the way we experience life. Some of these habits are deeply ingrained and we may not even realize they are affecting our choices and reactions. For instance, a person who grew up in a household where love was conditional may find themselves constantly seeking approval or fearing rejection even as an adult. This pattern, if left unexamined, can govern their actions and make them vulnerable to external criticism. However, by becoming aware of such patterns, we can begin to break free from them. We can learn to recognize when we are falling into old habits, and in doing so, we can make more conscious, intentional choices. This awareness provides us with the power to change the way we respond to the world. One of the most significant benefits of self-knowledge is that it allows us to develop emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, manage, and regulate our emotions, as well as the emotions of others. When we are aware of our own emotional state, we are better equipped to navigate difficult situations without being overwhelmed by our feelings. We can recognize when we are feeling angry, anxious, or sad, and we can choose how to respond rather than letting our emotions dictate our behavior. This emotional self-regulation is a crucial skill for maintaining stability and resilience in the face of adversity. Furthermore, self-knowledge enables us to cultivate a sense of inner peace when we are unclear about ourselves. We are often torn by inner conflict. We may find ourselves acting in ways that are not in alignment with our true selves, leading to frustration, confusion, and self-doubt. But when we have a deep understanding of who we are, we can act with authenticity and integrity. This inner alignment brings a sense of calm and steadiness even amidst chaos. It is through this peace that we can remain unmoved by the turbulent emotions and external circumstances that might otherwise disrupt our equilibrium. One of the challenges in developing self-knowledge is the influence of the external world. Society, culture, and family dynamics often shape our sense of self in ways that may not reflect our true essence. From a young age, we are taught to conform to societal expectations, to fit into predefined roles, and to pursue certain goals. As we grow older, we may find that these external influences have shaped our beliefs and desires, sometimes to the point where we no longer recognize our authentic selves. In order to uncover our true nature, we must learn to separate our own thoughts and desires from the expectations placed upon us by the world around us. This process of self-discovery often requires us to step away from the noise of the outside world. In our hyper-connected society, it is easy to become overwhelmed by the constant stream of information and the opinions of others. Social media in particular can create an environment where we constantly compare ourselves to others, leading to feelings of inadequacy or self-doubt. To truly understand ourselves, we must create space for introspection and reflection. This might mean spending time alone in nature, journaling, meditating, or simply taking moments of quiet to listen to our inner voice. By doing so, we begin to reconnect with our authentic selves and gain a clearer sense of who we truly are. As we embark on the journey of self-awareness, it is important to remember that this is an ongoing process. Self-knowledge is not something that can be achieved overnight. It requires patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to continually learn and grow. The more we explore ourselves, the deeper our understanding becomes. We may uncover new insights about our desires, our motivations, and our fears, and as we do, we refine our sense of self. This ongoing process of self-discovery is what allows us to stay anchored, no matter what life presents, to ensure that nothing affects you. The second key point revolves around cultivating emotional integration. Life is an intricate tapestry of experiences, and within this tapestry, emotions play a central role. Emotions are not merely reactions to external events. They are fundamental aspects of our being, offering insights into our inner worlds, our deepest values, and our unconscious fears. Yet, in many societies, emotions are often seen as something to control or suppress. Especially the so-called negative emotions such as anger, sadness, fear, and jealousy. However, the true path to emotional resilience lies not in rejecting these emotions, but in integrating them into our consciousness. By understanding and embracing the full spectrum of our emotional experiences, we can cultivate a deeper sense of emotional stability, which will allow us to remain grounded and unaffected by the unpredictable tides of life. The first step toward emotional integration is acknowledging that all emotions, whether considered positive or negative, are part of the human experience. We live in a culture that often categorizes emotions into two camps. Those that are good, such as happiness, love, and excitement, and those that are bad, such as anger, fear, and sadness. This simplistic approach fosters an environment where individuals are conditioned to repress, deny, or ignore emotions that are seen as undesirable. Many people feel ashamed of their negative emotions and try to suppress them out of fear of judgment, weakness, or inadequacy. Yet, emotions like anger and sadness, when properly understood and channeled, can be incredibly powerful forces for personal growth and transformation. Repressing emotions, however, does not make them disappear. Instead, it often results in them manifesting in unhealthy ways, whether as physical ailments, irrational behavior, or unconscious patterns of thought. For example, someone who suppresses anger may find themselves unexpectedly lashing out at others in moments of frustration, or someone who avoids sadness may experience chronic feelings of numbness or detachment. The more we try to ignore or deny our emotions, the more power they hold over us. By acknowledging and accepting all our emotions without judgment, we begin the process of emotional integration. Emotional integration is about becoming aware of and accepting emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. It requires us to approach our emotions not as obstacles to be avoided, but as valuable sources of information. Every emotion, no matter how uncomfortable, carries a message. For example, anger often arises when we feel that our boundaries have been violated. or that we are being treated unfairly. If we take the time to explore the anger, we can uncover what it is telling us about our values and needs. Similarly, sadness often emerges in response to loss, disappointment, or unfulfilled desires. Rather than avoiding the sadness, we can sit with it and allow ourselves to fully experience it. In doing so, we may uncover deeper truths about our attachments and what truly matters to us. In order to integrate emotions, we must first learn to identify them accurately. This may sound simple, but it is often more difficult than it seems. Many people experience emotions without fully understanding what they are feeling. For example, someone might feel a sense of discomfort in their body but label it as stress without recognizing that it is actually fear or anxiety. By cultivating emotional awareness, we can begin to decipher the messages our emotions are sending. It's important to pause and reflect on what we are feeling and why we might be feeling it. This practice of emotional awareness requires mindfulness, a conscious effort to stay present and non-reactive in the face of emotions. By allowing ourselves to simply observe the emotions as they arise, we create the space to understand them without being swept away by them. Once we are able to identify and understand our emotions, the next step in emotional integration is to embrace them fully. This does not mean acting on every emotion or letting them dictate our behavior, but rather acknowledging them and accepting them as part of our human experience. When we embrace our emotions, we allow ourselves to feel them without fear or resistance. This creates a sense of emotional freedom, as we are no longer controlled by the desire to avoid or suppress certain feelings. Rather than judging ourselves for feeling anger, sadness, or fear, we can simply accept that these emotions are natural responses to life's challenges. Embracing our emotions also means allowing ourselves to experience the full depth of our feelings. For example, if we are grieving a loss, we must give ourselves permission to feel the sadness fully rather than rushing to move on or get over it. The more we allow ourselves to feel our emotions, the more we can heal and grow from them. Emotional integration also involves learning how to express our emotions in healthy and constructive ways. When emotions are bottled up or left unexpressed, they can build up and eventually explode, leading to unhealthy reactions or strained relationships. On the other hand, expressing emotions in a way that is honest and respectful allows us to release pent-up feelings without causing harm to ourselves or others. For example, if we feel angry, it is essential to find a healthy outlet for that anger. This might involve taking a walk, journaling, or talking to someone we trust. The key is to express the emotion in a way that does not harm others or ourselves. Learning to express emotions constructively also means learning to communicate our needs and boundaries. When we are emotionally integrated, we can communicate our feelings openly and honestly without the fear of judgment or rejection. One of the most powerful tools for emotional integration is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment with openness and curiosity. By being mindful of our emotions, we can create a space between the stimulus, the event or situation that triggers the emotion, and our reaction. This space allows us to respond consciously rather than react impulsively. For example, if we feel angry in a conversation, mindfulness allows us to pause, take a deep breath, and choose how we want to respond, rather than immediately reacting in a defensive or aggressive way. Mindfulness helps us to stay grounded in the present moment, preventing us from becoming overwhelmed by our emotions or lost in negative thought patterns. It's also important to recognize that emotional integration is not about achieving emotional perfection. We are all human, and we will inevitably experience moments of emotional turbulence. The goal of emotional integration is not to eliminate all negative emotions, but to cultivate a healthy relationship with them. It's about learning how to navigate the full spectrum of emotions with grace and resilience, rather than being at the mercy of them. Emotions are a natural part of the human experience, and it's through their integration that we become more complete and whole individuals. By accepting, understanding, and expressing our emotions, we create emotional balance and cultivate a deeper sense of inner peace. In the process of emotional integration, it is also essential to cultivate self-compassion. Many people are incredibly hard on themselves when they experience difficult emotions. They may criticize themselves for feeling angry, sad, or afraid, believing that these emotions are signs of weakness or failure. However, emotional integration requires us to treat ourselves with kindness and understanding, just as we would treat a friend who is struggling with difficult emotions. Self-compassion allows us to accept our emotional experiences without judgment or shame. It helps us to navigate our feelings with a sense of grace and patience, knowing that emotions are a natural part of life's ebb and flow. Ultimately, emotional integration is the key to emotional resilience. When we embrace our emotions fully, without fear or resistance, we become more equipped to handle life's challenges with strength and clarity. By accepting our emotions as valuable sources of information and growth, we free ourselves from the tyranny of emotional suppression and reactivity. Instead of being overwhelmed by our feelings or controlled by them, we can navigate the world with a deep sense of emotional balance and inner peace. Emotional integration is not about avoiding difficult emotions or pretending that everything is always okay. It is about allowing ourselves to experience the full range of human emotions while staying grounded and centered in our authentic selves. When we integrate our emotions, we ensure that nothing, whether joy, sorrow, anger, or fear, can truly affect us in a way that throws us off course. We remain whole, balanced, and in control of our own emotional landscape. To ensure that nothing affects you, the third key point involves letting go of the need for external validation. In a world where external opinions, social expectations, and the approval of others often shape our sense of self-worth, cultivating an internal source of validation is one of the most powerful ways to achieve emotional stability and resilience. The need for external validation can be deeply ingrained in us from a young age, as society constantly emphasizes the importance of recognition, success, and approval from others. From academic achievements to social media likes, we are conditioned to seek validation from external sources to define our value and worth. However, when our sense of identity is constantly dependent on what others think or how they perceive us, we become vulnerable to the whims of external circumstances, leading to a lack of self-sufficiency and emotional independence. Learning to let go of this need and cultivate an internal source of validation is the key to ensuring that nothing in the world has the power to disturb our inner peace and sense of self. At the heart of the need for external validation is the desire to feel accepted and appreciated by others. As human beings, we naturally crave connection and affirmation. We want to feel seen, heard, and valued. This desire for acceptance is not inherently bad, as it can foster meaningful relationships and a sense of belonging. However, when we begin to derive our sense of self-worth solely from the approval of others, we set ourselves up for emotional instability. We become like a ship adrift on the ocean, tossed and turned by the ever-changing tides of other people's opinions. Every compliment, criticism, or judgment from others has the potential to make us feel elated or devastated, depending on whether we are receiving positive or negative feedback. This constant reliance on external validation undermines our sense of security and leaves us vulnerable to the unpredictable nature of social interactions and external circumstances. The first step in breaking free from the need for external validation is recognizing that our worth is not contingent upon the opinions of others. Each of us is inherently valuable, not because of how we are perceived by others, but because of who we are at our core. We are not defined by the accolades we receive, the status we hold, or the approval we garner from others. Our true worth lies in our intrinsic value as human beings. The moment we internalize this truth, we begin to release the grip that external validation has on us. We start to realize that no matter how others perceive us, our worth remains unshaken and unchangeable. This recognition allows us to stop seeking validation from others and start validating ourselves. The next step is to focus on developing a strong sense of self. When we rely on others for validation, we often find ourselves trying to fit into predefined roles or meet external expectations in order to gain approval. We might alter our behavior, beliefs, or even our values to align with what others expect of us, hoping that doing so will earn us recognition and praise. However, this behavior leads to a disconnect between our authentic selves and the version of ourselves we present to the world. We begin to lose touch with who we truly are, and our sense of identity becomes fragile and unstable. To break free from this cycle, we must begin the process of self-discovery. This involves taking the time to understand our own values, desires, passions, and aspirations. It means questioning the societal norms and expectations that have shaped our beliefs and deciding for ourselves what is truly important. By developing a strong sense of self, we become less dependent on the opinions of others, as we no longer feel the need to conform to external standards in order to feel validated. One of the most empowering ways to cultivate internal validation is to practice self-compassion. Self-compassion is the ability to treat ourselves with kindness, understanding, and acceptance, particularly during times of failure, disappointment, or struggle. It involves recognizing that we are worthy of love and care, regardless of our mistakes or shortcomings. When we practice self-compassion, we are no longer at the mercy of external approval because we have already accepted ourselves fully. We do not need the approval of others to feel good about ourselves, as we have learned to validate our own worth. Self-compassion also allows us to embrace our imperfections without judgment. It is through self-compassion that we come to realize that we do not need to be perfect in order to be worthy of love and respect. Our flaws and vulnerabilities are not weaknesses, but rather an integral part of our human experience. Another crucial element of letting go of external validation is learning to trust our own judgment and intuition. When we are constantly seeking approval from others, we often lose confidence in our own ability to make decisions. We may second-guess ourselves, seeking reassurance from friends, family, or colleagues before taking action. This lack of trust in our own judgment makes us more susceptible to external influence and less capable of standing firm in our own choices. In contrast, when we trust our intuition and judgment, we become more confident in our ability to navigate life's challenges. We no longer need to seek constant affirmation from others, as we have developed the inner strength to make decisions that align with our values and goals. Trusting ourselves allows us to move through life with a sense of autonomy and empowerment, knowing that we are the ones who ultimately determine our worth and direction. One of the most significant obstacles to letting go of external validation is the fear of rejection or criticism. Many of us fear that if we stop seeking approval from others, we will be rejected or judged harshly. We may worry that others will no longer accept us or that we will be seen as unworthy. This fear of rejection can keep us locked in the cycle of seeking validation as we desperately try to meet the expectations of others in order to avoid judgment or disapproval. However, the truth is that seeking validation from others is a futile endeavor, as we can never fully control how others perceive us. People's opinions are often influenced by their own biases, insecurities, and experiences, and no matter what we do, we cannot guarantee that everyone will approve of us. When we release the need for external validation, we free ourselves from the burden of seeking approval from others and stop living in fear of judgment. We come to understand that our worth is not dependent on whether others accept us, and that we are worthy of love and respect simply because we exist. Letting go of external validation also requires us to break free from the comparison trap. In today's world, social media has amplified the tendency to compare ourselves to others. We are constantly bombarded with images of success, beauty, and happiness, leading us to measure our own worth against the curated lives of others. This comparison often leads to feelings of inadequacy, jealousy, or envy, as we believe that we are somehow lacking or inferior. However, comparison is a toxic practice that only undermines our self-worth. Each person's journey is unique, and the standards of success or happiness that we see online are often distorted or incomplete. When we let go of the need for external validation, we stop measuring our worth against others and begin to focus on our own growth, progress, and fulfillment. We recognize that our value is not determined by how we compare to others, but by the unique qualities and strengths that we possess. In cultivating internal validation, we also learn to celebrate our own accomplishments and growth rather than waiting for others to acknowledge them. We no longer rely on praise or recognition from others to feel proud of our achievements. Instead, we learn to acknowledge and appreciate our own efforts, regardless of whether anyone else notices. This self-acknowledgement strengthens our sense of self-worth and fosters a deeper sense of fulfillment. By celebrating ourselves, we reinforce the belief that our value is inherent and not contingent on external recognition. Ultimately, letting go of the need for external validation is an act of self-liberation. It is about reclaiming our autonomy and recognizing that our worth is not determined by others, but by the essence of who we are. When we stop seeking validation from the outside world, we free ourselves from the constant pressure to conform, to impress, or to seek approval. We become more resilient in the face of criticism, less affected by praise, and more grounded in our own sense of self. In doing so, we ensure that nothing in the world can truly affect us because we are no longer reliant on external forces to define our worth. We become whole, authentic, and self-assured, knowing that we are enough just as we are. In conclusion, ensuring that nothing affects you in life requires a deep commitment to self-awareness, emotional integration, and letting go of the need for external validation. The foundation of emotional resilience begins with embracing self-acknowledge, understanding our inner workings, and developing a clear sense of who we are, independent of outside influences. This self-awareness allows us to respond to life's challenges with clarity instead of reacting impulsively to external circumstances. Furthermore, emotional integration teaches us to fully embrace and express our emotions, recognizing them not as obstacles, but as vital sources of information and personal growth. When we accept the full spectrum of our emotions, we create an inner balance that shields us from being overwhelmed by fleeting feelings or negative situations. Lastly, by letting go of the need for external validation, we free ourselves from the constant pursuit of approval, recognizing that our true worth comes from within. This internal validation leads to a life of confidence, autonomy, and unshakable self-assurance, regardless of the opinions or judgments of others. When these principles come together, we create a solid foundation that allows us to navigate the world with poise, grace, and emotional strength. We stop being at the mercy of external forces and instead cultivate the internal peace that comes from knowing ourselves fully, integrating our emotions healthily, and valuing ourselves from within. Through this journey, we discover that nothing can truly affect us because our sense of self remains steadfast and unwavering, anchored in the truth of who we are. This is the path to emotional freedom, one where we are no longer swayed by the world around us, but instead stand firm in our own authentic existence.